Hey everybody, Bandicoot Commando here, and welcome back to Metal Gear Solid 2. Last time, I pretty much showed a majority of some of the Easter eggs throughout the rest of the Metal Gear Solid 2 game. I didn't show all of them off, I only showed off some that I could show off. So, today we are going to read, there's 3 novels, and you unlock them as you read each one. So we will read the New York Mirror, and the other ones that will pop up. Before I read it, there's one more thing I want to mention. I think I mentioned this in one of the previous Easter eggs, but if I didn't, if you beat the game 3 times, if you do at least 3 playthroughs, you can unlock a set of shades for Snake and Raiden to wear. Just saying, so let us start the New York Mirror. Oh, whoa, that went by quickly. That went by too quickly for my taste. So now we're in the darkness of Shadow Moses, the unofficial truth, by Nastasha Romanek from Romanenko, who was from the previous game, and reviewed by George Franklin, and it's only 11 pages. Some topics in the recent American past have the intimacy and the power that still engage our collective imagination. Names like the grassy knoll or Roswell roll off of our tongue with deliberateness reserved by most other nations for holy lands. With the new non-fiction account from the Nastasha Romanenko, Shadow Moses, the scene of a nuclear siege 2 years ago, is set to join the ranks. Let me just say, in-universe, I believe the events of Metal Gear Solid in-universe were... So the game came out in 1998, but I think, if I recall correctly... let's see. If I recall correctly, though... Yeah, the events of Shadow Moses and the events of Metal Gear Solid. The game came out in 1998, but... the events took place in 2005, while the events of the Big Shell, and by extension the tanker, take place in 2009? So yeah, it's a weird timeline thing. Anyway, Shadow Moses, the scene of a nuclear siege 2 years ago, is set to join their ranks. Official history states that the takeover of a nuclear weapon disposal facility on a lonely outpost in the Fox Islands, Alaska, was the work of a radical right-wing group. Their demands for the release of group members incarcerated in federal penitentiaries were never met, and the incident was speedily resolved by the successful deployment of a Commando Unit BS. The author asserts, Romanenko says that she served as an advisor to the Nuclear Emergency Search Team and deconstructs what she claims to be a cover-up story by the government with precision. I mean, honestly, if you play Metal Gear Solid, you could pretty much go through the whole game without interacting with Nastasha at least once. You probably don't have to. Anyway, according to the author, Shadow Moses Island was nothing less than the U.S. Army's testing grounds for a top-secret weapon known as Metal Gear Rex, an all-terrain bipedal tank with advanced nuclear capabilities. As for the facility's takeover, Romanenko alleges that it was the U.S. military's own shadowy Wet Works force, known as Foxhound, that staged an armed insurrection in a bid for Rex's possession. The government responds to this crisis by sending in a lone operative, a former Foxhound member known only by the code name Solid Snake, into Shadow Moses. His infiltration is aided by a remote mission control team consisting of an unidentified Colonel Campbell, a Foxhound medical chief, Naomi, a radar and electronics expert, Mei Ling, supposedly a teenager, and the author herself. Once on the island, Snake joins forces with Metal Gear's developer-turned-prisoner, Otacon, to eradicate the weapon of mass destruction. Among the other remarkable characters that make an appearance in Romanenko's Expose is another Foxhound commando, A revolver virtual soul called Shalashaska, aka Revolver Ocelot. One of the most controversial alleged allegations in the book deals with this figure's connection to a disavowed Russian militia led by a Colonel Gorukovich. Romanenko paints a bleak picture of 1,000-strong, highly disciplined army with nuclear weaponry operating covertly within the American border. Even more irresistible to conspiracy scholars and students of recent history is her thinly veiled suggestion that the whole affair was planned from the beginning by certain forces inside the U.S. government. The U.S. Army and the usual suspect of federal agencies have issued a statement denouncing the book as a complete fabrication. However, with a number of detailed eyewitness accounts that back up the author's assertions cropping up daily on the web, the denials serve more to enhance the book's growing reputation. Shadow Moses is an engrossing read for casual and serious readers alike, and promises to involve readers in a meaty debate over the truth of the matter for many years to come. Excerpt from the literary review column, All Booked Up, The New York Mirror. Metal Gear Solid. Oh, what do we have here? PlayStation and the PlayStation logo are registered trademarks of the Sony Computer Entertainment Inc. Metal Gear Solid VX055-U2, Metal Gear Solid, the VR Message, VX147-U1, available now. Now we can read, the shocking conspiracy behind Shadow Moses. How long is this? Oh boy, this is going to take a while. Might need to get some water. The Shocking Conspiracy Behind Shadow Moses by Gary McGolden. The island of Shadow Moses lies due north of Alaska's Fox Islands, deep in the Arctic Circle. Above one of its rocky cliffs stands a cabin normally used for meteorological surveys, and it was here that I found myself seated on a chair with my hands bound behind my back and a burlap sack covering my entire head. A blizzard rages outside, and the cabin was a dark, silent patch somewhere inside the storm. I can sense at least four men around me. They had been interrogating me for what felt like hours now. The burlap sack is pungent with the traces of coffee beans. In the biting cold of the cabin, images of Brazil came to me unbidden. Alleys coiled with vivid, untended profusion of flowers. Children with skin like frothy chocolate. Sunshine capable of burning out the cornea, erupting between palm fronds. I could feel my senses starting to fail. The man in the front of me asked for the second or the 100th time. I'm going to ask you again. What's in the optical disc? Told you, I don't know. I just found it, okay? You're lying, you bastard! A fist explodes into the pit of my stomach, bringing up a peanut butter sandwich of many hours ago along with the rusty taste of blood. The relentlessness beating and numerous knife cuts of the past hour have my whole body screaming with pain, but I refused to tell them what they wanted. I had too much invested at this point, too many days of dangerous investigation into the story of a lifetime. There was no way I was going to give it all up at this point. That's enough. A voice spoke up from somewhere in the back of the cabin. We have the disc back. Just get rid of him so we can get out of this place. Even in my current sorry state, I was still a journalist. He had said, we have the disc back. That meant that my hosts were the original owners of that optical disc. The last piece of the puzzle was in its place. I knew beyond a shadow of doubt that everything recorded on the disc was true, and that the conspiracy I had suspected did in fact exist. At that moment, I heard a window shatter. The raging storm outside seemed to gain entry to the cabin in an instant, and I heard thin screams from the captors that encircled my chair. The next second, they had already fallen heavily onto the floor. The brief confusion ended before I regained enough presence of mind to even panic. Whoever was now here, whatever had happened, my tormentors were obviously out of commission, but now I could hear measured footsteps approaching across the floor. If this person had just saved my life, who was it? Or was I about to share the other's fate? The footsteps came to a halt in front of me, but strangely enough, I did not feel any sort of a presence nearby. The burlap was slowly lifted from around my head, pulled off by an unseen hand. The stinging night air cooled my face, and my eyes gradually regained focus in the darkened room. And I could finally see who it was that stood just before me. Just out of sight of most of its citizens, a massive conspiracy determines the working of this nation. Weapons of mass destruction, secretly developed by the military. Super soldiers re-engineered into war machines through genetic manipulation. A killer virus that only targets specific individuals with deadly accuracy. Tanks that walk rather than roll and carry a nuclear payload. A covert organization, the third and the most powerful political party, my encounter with which landed me in this chair in the Alaskan winter. All of these are a part of a truth I found sealed within the optical disc, and I intend to share what I have learned in the pages to follow. That includes everything I now know about our government and the secret arena where our even greater power pulls the strings. This is the truth many have glimpsed, but never dared to talk about. Everything detailed in this book actually happened, and after I lived it, my world was no longer the same safe place I knew. Neither, I promise, will be yours if you have the courage to keep going. It all began a month ago. The postman rings. A month before my dramatic escape from death on Shadow Moses, I was having late breakfast in my apartment in New York. Ever since an alien abduction episode in my childhood, I have been plagued by a persistent ringing in my ears. A large patch of mud was my undoing. I slipped, fell, and was knocked unconscious. When I came to, it was already dawn. Later, I was trying to see the bump on the back of my head in the mirror when I saw an IT instead. A small hole about the size of a pinprick had been made behind my ear. You learn a little something when you watch as much TV as I did. There was no doubt that I had been abducted by a passing UFO and had spent the hours while unconscious with alien beings. Unfortunately, no one in the area recalled seeing a UFO, and not a single person had the sense to listen to my story. I had realized now that this was the day I decided to uncover the truth for a living and become a journalist. But back to the present day. It turned out that the ringing wasn't in my ear, but from the doorbell. The thing shrieked somewhere south of a baritone bat sonar, barely within the range of human hearing. Blame the mangling it took from a particularly displeased visitor. Outside the door was the mailman, and in the mailman's hand was a thick manila envelope. On the envelope was a label addressed to me. A letter bomb! I pressed my ear against the envelope and concentrated hard, but not a tick from the thing. Of course, no one uses analog watches and bombs these days. That's why they call it the digital age. In fact, why would there even be a watch and a letter bomb? The point is that the unlucky recipient opens it and the bomb goes off, which means it's actually the completely silent envelopes that are dangerous. I knew that opening that flap would send my eggs to the big omelet in the sky, but you don't get to be an investigative journalist for thinking inside the box. I tore through the bottom of the envelope. Instead, rip! No, the contents of the suspicious envelope dropped to the floor with lightning speed. In this world, you can never be too careful. Let this be a warning to you readers. When circumstances compel you to open an envelope from the bottom, turn it upside down first. As a rule, I discovered objects fall down, and this is what happened to the contents of my lethal envelope. Straight down into a half-eaten depth of a delivery pizza forgotten on the floor. I don't recall when exactly this food item arrived on these premises, but the thing was definitely a museum piece by now. Fortunately, it wasn't a bomb, but an optical storage disc, now liberally smeared with peanut butter. The disc was the kind that comes in a clear plastic casing, though which the rainbow sheen of the circular unit shone. I gazed into it a while, thinking of the UFO from that fateful day. Anyway, I fished the optical disc out, noting the lack of a label. A quick wash at the sink got rid of the crud it had accumulated. The disc was drying by the window as I hunted through the now harmless envelope for clues. A single sheet of Xerox paper was stuck to the inside, and it read, "From the desk of Max Smithson, Editor-in-Chief, Mega Surprise Magazine. I'm mailing you this optical disc that was sent to the edit department. It's right up your alley. See if you could turn up something more. We'll do a book if you get enough stuff together. This is your chance for a comeback, so don't screw it up." Max is an old friend, and we used to manage most of my book deals way back then when. We hadn't seen each other much since I gave up writing. Not that he has the right to tell me about comebacks and screwing up, but I find myself growing excited by the prospect of writing another book. But there was a problem, and it was a big one. How the hell was I going to get to the disc content? The shocking truth within. My next-door neighbor is a starving college student, and I hit him up for the use of his computer now and then. I banged on his door and screamed repeatedly until he shuffled to the door, half asleep. Once inside, I made a beeline for the piece of junk and stuck the disk into the drive. The icon appeared on the display with a gentle whirl. The file name read, "In the Darkness of Shadow Moses." But an urgent click on the icon only brought up an error message. What nefarious scheme was this? What secret encryption was preventing me from accessing the data? I clicked again, and again with the same result. It started to gnaw on the keyboard in frustration. The starving student came running over, wailing about his equipment. He typed in some Moon Man language, avoiding patches of my spit, and a frighteningly cheerful application startup screen appeared on the display. Then, lo and behold, I finally laid my eyes on the dense mass of text, the contents of the disk. At the very top it read, "In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, by Nastasia Romanenko." The starving student was being scholarly and trying to read the text over my shoulder. I knocked him out with a punch to the solar plexus and devoured the file's content. It was like a blow to the head with a frozen tuna. My brain was reeling from the shock. The file was full of wild stuff. Top secret conspiracies, incredible genetic experimentation, cold-blooded military deployment of classified weapons. This was the most incredible stuff I had ever come across. The unofficial facts, according to the disk. Most readers should be aware of the series of strange military actions involving an island farther up north of Alaska's Fox Islands. Some 2 years ago, the island was called Shadow Moses and received a series of well-documented but never explained visits of an obvious significance. The USS Discovery, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, was ordered away from its designated training area and was confirmed offshore of Shadow Moses Island. It joined an E-3C AWACS that had already and suddenly been deployed to the area, with none other than Jim Hausman, the National Security Advisor, on board. 16 hours later, 6 F-117 Nighthawks with full a payload took off from the Galena AFB for Alaska. Various theories were placed into circulation by the media at the time. Some journalists insisted it had been a foiled invasion attempted by a foreign state. Others suspected a coup d'etat by a part of the U.S. military. I myself wrote an opinion piece for a magazine explaining that Shadow Moses was the Ellis Island for the Greys. This diminutive Grey race is, after all, the most famous of our alien neighbors, notorious for having secret bases all over planet Earth. But according to this file, we had all been off of our marks. What had instead unfolded on Shadow Moses was the most major terrorist incident in history. An apocalyptic scenario born out of a government-deployed Superman project and a doomsday weapon of the same origin. On that fateful day, the nuclear weapons disposal plant on Shadow Moses had suddenly been seized by an irregular operations squad called Foxhound, aided by a group of next-generation super soldiers. And what they threatened was no less than a nuclear strike against the mainland United States. So how is it that we're still alive? Apparently, we have a man known only as Solid Snake and his solitary infiltration of the disposal facility to thank for it. Believe it or not, this is only the tip of the iceberg as far as the Shadow Moses incident is concerned. The disc contains many more horrifying facts, such as a major government conspiracy, a classified weapon described as a walking nuclear-capable tank, and advanced genetic manipulation projects. Many of these hidden dealings were discovered by Solid Snake as he carried out his mission, and it is now my job to relate these facts to you, the readers. But it is still a little too premature to do so. The content of the disc may, after all, be nothing more than fiction, or even a delusion. After all, who exactly is this Nastasia Romanenko? In search of Nastasia Romanenko. A quick search of the web turned up a few illuminating facts about this elusive writer. Nastasia Romanenko was at one point with the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. At the time of the Shadow Moses incident, she appears to have been a freelance military analyst, having already resigned from the agency. Nuclear and weapons technology would certainly be right up her alley, and in the disc, she states that she took part in Solid Snake's mission support. Her exact role was a member of NEST, Nuclear Emergency Search Team, providing field expertise via the radio. Her intimate involvement in the mission gives her a complete and clear grasp of the facts surrounding the case, despite the government's successful cover-ups. A look at Romanenko's curriculum vitae and body of papers makes her an anti-nuclear stance more than obvious. That, along with all the other facts about this person, suggest that unless she suffered a sudden chemical imbalance, or is plotting a second career as a Hollywood screenwriter, Nastasia Romanenko does not indulge in expounding conspiracy theories all for its own sake. All very interesting. So where is Nastasia Romanenko now? I decided to give Global Elements Inc., the book's publisher, a call. Below is a complete transcript of the conversation. Hello, listen, you leftover Carnival Prize. What do you know about a woman named Nastasia Romanenko? Whoever it was. Hey, your village called. They want their idiot back, and watch your language, freak. Well, that's rude. Clearly they're hiding something. Why else would the abrupt response and the hasty hang-up? I was on the trail of something important, something dangerous. If the content of the disc was true, this Nastasia Romanenko was definitely the woman who knew too much. Her life would be in danger, and she must either have gone to ground or was already dead. That brief telephone conversation spoke volumes. There was a contract out for her life. If this was the price of speaking the truth as described in that disc, the picture was complete. But was everything she wrote really true? I went back to my apartment and packed a bag. I was headed for Shadow Moses. The coldest place. I took a plane out to the northernmost domestic airport and went to see my cousin, John D. John D. is a hardcore Alaskan and a big-eyed tuna fisherman. When I asked him to drop me off at Shadow Moses Island during one of his trips out to sea, he turned pale, and a nervous tick started up from the corner of his eye. Shadow Moses? Are you nuts? All the other guys say the place is crawling with the military. If you get even close to the shore, they shine these huge searchlights in your face, and some of my buddies even got interrogated once. I felt the sudden chill of fear along with a certainty that I was on the right track. You're a wuss, you know that? Try being abducted by a UFO. That'll teach you what's really scary. I got a family, you know. I'm not about to go messing around with the man. Okay, you get me as close as you can, and I'll swim the rest of the way. Swim? You're going to turn into frozen tuna treat. Don't worry about that. I have an idea. We sailed out for Shadow Moses Island that day. The trip to Shadow Moses. It was colder than the dairy section, and the boat pitched like a subway derailment on the caffeine. I shook constantly from the cold, retracted peanut butter into the sea, and then down some more to keep me warm. A few days passed in this pleasant fashion, until John D., drawing lines on his chart, turned to me. I'm sorry, man, but this is as far as I can go. If you really want to do this thing, you're going to have to find your own way. There were at least 20 miles to Shadow Moses, according to the chart. But John D. was already a blubbering wreck, and I didn't have the heart to strong-arm him. I steeled my nerves. It's okay. Help me get ready. The plan was brilliant. I gutted a supersized tuna and stuffed some inflated balloons inside, along with a small oil lamp to keep the interior toasty. I would cover the length of the body with the fish and dog paddle my way to the island. Any oxygen shortage could quickly be remedied thanks to the balloon, and my landing would appear to be nothing more than a large dead fish swept ashore. All I had to do was slip out of the tuna undetected and investigate the hell out of the place. Absolutely brilliant. I bore the fishy stink of the tuna skin with proper journalistic aplomb and walked to the edge of the ship's deck. The Arctic wind was numbing even through the wetsuit, but I bade John D. a hearty farewell and jumped into the sea. But right then, disaster struck. Actually, it was the tuna spine. Its bony mass conked me hard on the back of my head from the force of the landing. I tried to right myself, but I was jammed tight against the balloons. The tuna started to sink rapidly, and I kicked my legs wildly as about a gallon of seawater rushed to my lungs. To add insult to injury, the lamp fell over, shedding its cover. I could feel the heat of the exposed flame dangerously close to my face, and smell the singed hair. This is why I hate traveling. But after what felt like hours, I found myself ashore on Shadow Moses Island. Let's take a moment here to review what happened on the island on that fateful day. Romanenko's disc provides a complete answer. Shadow Moses was no ordinary weapons disposal facility, but served as a secret military training ground among other things. On that day, the Wet Works Commando Unit known as Foxhound, and the Next Generation Special Forces Group were conducting joint exercises. Foxhound is an irregular squad of elite soldiers, equipped and armed to the teeth with the latest technology. They were long time and strictly behind the scenes players throughout recent history, engaging in sabotage, selective assassinations, and other covert military operations. Wherever the United States could not officially intervene, whenever it was a civil war, regional unrest, or other types of low-intensity conflict, Foxhound was there. It's unlikely, however, that an average citizen had ever heard of them before. These commandos remain a top-secret government project. And then there's the Next Generation Special Forces Unit. This is a cutting-edge anti-terrorist force newly organized to cope with terrorist incidents, specifically involving weapons of mass destruction, typified in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. They draw heavily from the former mercenary ranks and are on a diet of rigorous VR training, guided by the Force 21 concept. The result is combat capability, which is rumored to surpass even those of the Delta Force and the DevGru, formerly known as SEAL Team 6. Most frightening of all, these soldiers have supposedly been manipulated at the genetic level to increase their combat performance. They were the purebred among the dogs of war, and they turned on their masters with a surprising demand. Having seized the civilians that were on hand, they demanded that the government turned over to them the body of Foxhound's founder and combat genius, the so-called Big Boss. The government had 24 hours to comply, or a nuclear strike would be initiated. But what would motivate them to make such a demand? And how did they intend to make good of their threat of a nuclear launch? With these questions still unanswered, the government decided on a seemingly reckless course of action. For this daunting task of stopping a nuclear strike and freeing the hostages from the clutches of these ultimate... I have to rub my eyes here so I can't see. From these ultimate soldiers, they sent in a single man. His name was Solid Snake, no other than a former member of the now renegade Foxhound and a legend among mercenaries for single-handedly bringing down the fortress cities of Outer Heaven, I keep calling it Outer Haven, but Outer Heaven and Zanzibar land. Your reaction is probably one of incredulity. Just one guy. You may wonder. They decided to gamble the future of the entire world on a single mercenary? I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment. But there is more to this mission than meets the eye, as I was later to discover. Solid Snake's remote support team. Snake was delivered to the island by the USS Discovery, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. He may have been the lone field operative, but there was a distinguished mission control team in contact with him by radio. The overall control of the mission rested with Colonel Roy Campbell aboard the USS Discovery. As a former commander of Foxhound and Snake's CO during the 1999 Zanzibar land standoff, he was forcefully called out from retirement to deal with this latest crisis. Also aboard the Discovery was Dr. Naomi Hunter, a genetic engineering expert with the commercial biotech firm ATGC Inc. She was in charge of Foxhound's gene manipulation program. Mei Ling, the architect of the mission's state-of-the-art radar and communication systems, was the third team member. Apparently, something of an engineering wonder kind, she developed this next-generation communication technology while still a student at MIT. At the time of the mission, she may have still been in her teens. McDonald Miller, A former Foxhound survivor instructor was the only land-bound member of the mission control team. Unlike the other four, Miller was working out of his home in Alaska at his own request. Lastly, Nastasia Romanenko, the author of In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, rounded out the team as an expert on nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. Oh boy, we're getting there. We just got another several pages to go. What terrorist acts were committed here? The hostages and what they tell us. The first task faced by Solid Snake upon his infiltration of Shadow Moses Island was the rescue of the hostages. Two of the captives, in particular, were considered top priority, but neither survived the mission. Though Snake successfully freed both men, they died suddenly in an identical manner. At the time, the mission's control team tentatively attributed the deaths to heart attacks, a diagnosis that was to prove starkly incorrect. The first hostage was Donald Anderson, the head of the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, the R&D body of the U.S. Department of Defense. The organization is responsible for planning and overseeing the development of new weapons technology. The other VIP hostage, Kenneth Baker, was the president of Arms Tech, one of the largest and most powerful defense subcontractors in the country. An overseer of the U.S.'s war technology and a powerful arms producer don't just happen to meet in an out-of-the-way military outpost. No one reading this account can fail to realize that these two had no business in a nuclear weapons disposal plant. And since neither Anderson nor Baker was in the habit of enjoying winter picnics, Romanenko's assertion that there was a new weapon secretly being developed on the island rings all the more truth. According to her, there was indeed such a weapon, and it was close enough to completion to warrant a field test. But what exactly was this new weapon? The mother of all weapons. Metal Gear. I'm not sure if it's a term that many of you have heard. I know it only as a journalistic urban legend while I was still a beat reporter. It was a phantom bipedal tank that moved with unprecedented speed across difficult terrain, such as mountains, desert, and swamp, firing nuclear warheads from locations that were previously impossible. Once this weapon rolled off the assembly line, nuclear strikes could be made from almost any adverse terrain, and the tactical nuclear map for the whole world would be rewritten. This nuclear-capable bipedal tank is said to have lurked in the wings of both Outer Heaven of South Africa and Zanzibar land in Central Asia. One theory holds that the development had progressed to a working prototype stage, but the weapon never materialized on the world arms stage. In a strange coincidence, or a casual connection, it was none other than Solid Snake who saved the world from the threat of Metal Gear during both incidents. But history does indeed repeat itself, and the specter of Metal Gear rose once again in the state-of-the-art weapons development program on Shadow Moses Island. When I reached this point in the narrative, I suddenly checked myself. Wasn't Metal Gear's time effectively over? Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union late last century, the idea of mutual assured destruction and the arms race to maintain this dangerous status quo had been fading into obsolescence. The START II treaty by both superpowers had already started to chip away at the nuclear stockpiled even back then. In fact, the disposal facility at Shadow Moses had been built to disarm and temporarily store many of these same warheads. With the very idea of nuclear weapons under serious scrutiny, why would the military invest in the development of a nuclear-capable tank? Or was there something more to this weapon?